By WDEV and the Radio Vermont Group. We welcome listener feedback. Email your comments to wdev@radiovermont.com.
The energy. How does anybody live and drive in Boston every single day? This guy stopped in the middle of the road with his hazard lights on. This guy won't yield. That guy won't let you go. That guy passes in front of you. That guy goes 3 lanes of traffic all in one shot. How does anybody do this?
The passion.
Look, if the Red Sox aren't going to play Yoshida Endeavors as they're about to get swept, then we might as well just give up and go home.
The opinions on all your favorite teams.
I'm glad that Mac Jones looks better. That's really important. He needs to look better. But if it were a video game, he'd still have an overall rating of 76, and that ain't cutting it.
This is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
What's up, everybody? A very happy Friday to you on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Shorter show tonight. We're up until 6:10, and it's Red Sox baseball. Sox taking on the Mets in the first game of a big series. They're all big series at this point for the Red Sox. When you get inside 70 games, that's what we call sprint territory. The Red Sox are 3 games back right now for the final wild card spot in the American League. All games are important. All wins are important. When you play teams that are under 500, even teams that are as talented as the Mets are, you've got to accumulate victories. You failed to do that against the A's, dropping 2 of 3. Now you got to come out here and try to do it against the Mets. The show is brought to you by Fecto Homes, your total housing solution. Again, they're online at fectohomes.com. Big show, even in 40 minutes. We got Mike McMahon from College Hockey News joining us in about 15 minutes. He'll talk more about the UVM men's hockey situation, where the Catamounts go from here. What does he know about the Todd Woodcroft situation? What does he know about Stephen Wiedler, the interim head coach? So a lot to get to over these 40 minutes. Again, you can get in on the Ayer Auto text line. That's 802-585-3026. That's 802-585-3026. They're online at AyerAutoSales.com. Danny, hit the "and here we go" button.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
The opening thoughts on the Brady Farkas Show are brought to you by Sticks and Stuff and by Swanton Lumber, Vermont's most complete locally owned home center with locations in Enosburg, Derby, Middlesex, St. Albans, and at Swanton Lumber. They're online at sticksandstuff.com. Again, we know that bad weather is coming in. You've heard now multiple National Weather Service updates over the course of the last 45 minutes or so on this station. If there's any more to come in, we will deviate from the sports talk and bring that to you. Your safety and your community's safety is the first thing that matters to us here, as much as we love talking about sports. But again, hopefully those don't come in, and hopefully things remain safe. I do want to start here. It's hard to believe that Patriots training camp begins next week. Like summer feels to me like it just started, and here we are already transitioning towards fall. Patriots training camp begins next week, and as Patriots training camp begins, the conversation's going to center on one of 2 things. That's it. When it comes to the Patriots, all you're going to hear about is one of 2 things. One is Mac Jones, and 2 is Bill Belichick. That is it, right? And all the offshoots of those 2 things. What's Bill's future like? How long does Bill have left? Is Bill still a good coach? Is Bill still the best coach? Where does Bill rank? How about Mac? What about his contract? What about their relationship? That is what you are going to hear. That is, I'm sure, what we're going to be talking about as well, at least up until preseason games. That is going to be the conversation at hand about the New England Patriots. I want to address something on Mac Jones right now, because I heard something very, very interesting yesterday. Yesterday, before I come into the studio, I'm watching Colin Cowherd of Fox Sports Radio, who's kind of like my sports radio idol. I think that he is the best. He was out there on air at Fox Sports Radio defending Mac Jones, right? I've spent a lot of time, I wouldn't say bashing, but I call myself the Mac Jones truth teller. And Colin's out here defending Mac Jones. In fact, he called Mac Jones a B quarterback. And then Colin went out and said this about Mac.
I think Mac Jones pretty good. I think he's absolutely as good as Kirk Cousins. Absolutely. No question. And I think Kirk Cousins is a B, Dak's a B to a B plus. I think he's in that Derek Carr B plus. I do. But he's got literally he has no number one receiver, no number one tight end. His college receivers were far better than his current Patriot receivers. His college backup receiver was Jalen Waddle.
So Colin says that Mac Jones is as good as Kirk Cousins. Let me explain something to you. That is not a good thing. That is not something that I aspire for my quarterback to be. What did I tell you the day Mac Jones was drafted? You can go find the archives. Go back to the end of April of 2021 and look at the podcast channel. And I promise you, I said that day that Mac Jones' ceiling is Kirk Cousins, and I wasn't happy about it. And here we are, 2.5 years later. Colin says Mac's as good as Kirk Cousins. And you know what? I'm still not happy about it. That is not at all what I want to hear. Now, let me make this clear to you. Kirk Cousins does not stink. Kirk Cousins does not stink. And I don't think that Mac Jones stinks. But don't you see the problem with Cowherd's statement? You're saying that Mac Jones is a quarterback that needs everything to be perfect for him in order to be successful. Because you know what? That's what Kirk Cousins needs. And you know what? That's not what I want. So here we are. Here's that word again. That word is special. I've been saying it for 2 years. Mac Jones isn't that. That's what I want. If you ask me, my dream scenario at quarterback, is to have somebody is special. So telling me that Mac Jones is Kirk Cousins and telling me that Mac Jones is as good as Kirk Cousins and telling me that he's a B quarterback and telling me this, that, or the other, no, that doesn't make me happy. In fact, it validates everything that I've thought about Mac Jones for the last 2 years. Okay? I say that Kirk Cousins doesn't stink, but you know what Kirk Cousins needs to be good? Everything going in his favor. He needs a softer schedule. He needs a weaker division. He needs a good offensive line. He needs a good running game. He needs great wideouts. This is what Kirk Cousins needs to be successful. He needs to be completely insulated from problems. So you telling me that Mac Jones is Kirk Cousins just proves what I've said all along, that he also needs to be insulated from problems. He also needs everything to be perfect. I think the Vikings won 13 games last year. I think 13-4 was their regular season record. You know what? Everything went largely perfect for them. Kirk Cousins looked great. Why? Everything's in his favor. The division was a dumpster fire, right? The Lions started off like 1-6. Despite how good they were at the end, they were terrible at the beginning. The Packers regressed big time, and everyone thought Aaron Rodgers was done. And the Bears are in a total rebuild. So Kirk Cousins last year plays in a soft division. Kirk Cousins last year has the best wide receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins last year has Dalvin Cook, a very competent and good running back. He also has Adam Thielen, who's been a top receiver in this league before and is certainly still crafty enough to be good now. He goes and gets an offensive-minded head coach and play caller in Kevin O'Connell. Everything last year came up Kirk Cousins. That's why he was good. And then you get to the playoffs and you get bounced in your first game at home because Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. And that's what Mac Jones is. Again, Mac Jones is fine, but I don't want fine. I want special. You know who's special? Patrick Mahomes. You know who's special? Josh Allen. You know who's special? Joe Burrow. You know who's got elements of special in him? Jalen Hurts. What have all those guys done, except for Allen? Been to the Super Bowl, and he's been to the AFC title game. Lamar Jackson's got elements of special. I want guys who have special traits, special arm talent, special mind, special athleticism, a guy who can overcome things when everything is not perfect. And that's not Mac Jones. It's what I have said forever. And if you don't believe me, you can go check the podcast channel because I've been saying it for 2 years. Peter in Williston says, Colin also put up this question. If there was an AFC East Pro Bowl roster, how many Patriots would there be? That shows how mediocre New England is. If there was an AFC East Pro Bowl roster, I think there would be 3 Patriots on it. Matthew Judon, Kyle Duggar, and Ramondre Stevenson. That's what I think. So the Patriots do have a mediocre roster. They have a mediocre quarterback. And they have a guy who needs everything to be perfect, and we know how rare that is in the NFL, right? Your schedule is hard. Guys get injured. You get injured. And you rarely get perfect. You rarely get perfect. This is why earlier in the week, I was so mad about the DeAndre Hopkins situation. Like, this is why I was furious. Because, as I've said, Mac Jones needs everything perfect. So you know what DeAndre Hopkins would have done? It would have given him a situation that was closer to perfect, and the Patriots decided not to do that. They either don't want to help Mac Jones, they're trying to sabotage Mac Jones, or they think Mac Jones is much better than I think, and after last year, I don't know how you could think that. Mac Jones needs help. You got him the offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien. That's great. That was necessary. You needed. Now, from a player standpoint, what can we do to get him as close to the Kirk Cousins situation as possible? Well, we didn't draft him a first-round wide receiver. We didn't draft him a first-round left tackle. We could have gone out and signed DeAndre Hopkins, and now we didn't do that either. Look at what Mac Jones has. Offensive-minded coordinator, that'll help. Pretty good defense. That'll help, too. He's got Belichick, which will help the defense, not so much him. And then offensively, he's got a pretty good running game, and after that, we don't know what else. Okay? Signing DeAndre Hopkins would have made it closer to a perfect situation for him. It also would have given a little more depth and allowed you to absorb an injury. Now, if this team loses Kendrick Bourne week 1, if this team loses Juju Smith-Schuster week 1, if they lose Devontae Parker week 1, all of which are possible, then what does this team look like without those guys? Drastically different and drastically worse. And having DeAndre Hopkins would have absolutely helped overcome some of that. But the Patriots didn't do it. They didn't do it. Kirk Cousins needs perfect. Mac Jones needs perfect. Patriots had a chance to help him get closer to perfect and elected not to. Look around the league. Okay, look around the league. The teams that are doing this right, that know they have some limitations at quarterback, are doing what they can to help. By Seahawks. Geno Smith is not that much better than Mac Jones. Geno Smith is good. Not great. I think if the Seahawks are going to be really, really good, things have to go perfectly for Geno. At least he's got DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and a first-round wide receiver in Jackson Smith and Jigba. And they went out and they drafted a first-round DB and the kid Witherspoon from Illinois. And they've got a good play caller in Shane Waldron. And, you know, the Cardinals don't look very good and the Rams don't look very good. So the division outside of San Francisco looks like there's some wins to be had there. Geno Smith is in a good situation. He has been elevated by what's around him. I look at the Miami Dolphins. Is Tua that much better than Mac? He might not be better than Mac at all. But his team went out and got Jalen Waddle, a first-round receiver, and traded for Tyreek Hill. And they go get him an offensive-minded play-calling head coach in Mike McDaniel. The teams that have limited quarterbacks are trying their best to help them, whereas the Patriots are not. And that's why it's so frustrating to me. That is why it's so frustrating to me. And then when Colin says, hey, he's as good as Kirk Cousins, that's great. That's not what I want. I want the Joe Burrow special. I want to be playing in February for a Super Bowl, not hoping that the Jets become a train wreck or that the Dolphins become a train wreck. As I've said, hope is not a strategy. Okay? Hope is not a strategy. The Patriots are in the hope zone right now. Other teams are building. The Patriots are hoping, and that is a problem. It's the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. I want to trade. We'll have a lot more Patriot stuff coming, as always, here. The camp again begins next week. I think Wednesday I saw is the first day of practice, whatever the 26th is. I think that's Wednesday. But before we fully transition into just baseball and football mode, I want to put what I hope is the finishing touches on what's been a tumultuous week over at UVM, right? Earlier this week, men's ice hockey coach Todd Woodcroft dismissed inappropriate text messages to a student. That's all we know at this point, but we know they were sufficient enough to warrant his termination, according to athletic director Jeff Schulman, a guy who's got his pulse on, or his fingers on the pulse of everything college hockey, is our friend Mike McMahon over at College Hockey News. He's with us now. Mike, thank you for being with us on a Friday. How are you?
I'm very good. How about yourself?
I am well as well. It has been a tumultuous week here and in the UVM athletic department. Let me just ask you kind of up front here, what was your reaction when you heard the news earlier this week?
It was surprising, obviously. Just the situation in general. When you hear something about something like that transpiring, it is surprising. It's surprising the timeline too. I mean, in the middle of the summer is not often for a coaching change. Obviously, there were extenuating circumstances here. But yeah, no, it was definitely a little bit of a surprise. There were some rumblings earlier in the week on Monday and earlier Tuesday that something was going on. Really couldn't get a real good idea of what it was. So it wasn't a total shock in the sense that earlier, about 24 hours before the actual announcement came down, there were starting to be some rumblings among people in the college hockey community that something may be going on there and there may be a coaching change of some kind. But so the announcement wasn't necessarily a shock, but hearing that a potential announcement could be coming was a shock given the timing and the circumstances.
I've put this disclaimer on my comments all week. Todd Woodcroft was unbelievable to me. He was unbelievable to our show, and the Todd Woodcroft that I know was a man of integrity. That said, just because someone is great to me does not mean that they are great to other people, and it does not mean that they are great all the time. So I'm asking you, from your interactions with Todd Woodcroft, if you've had any, who was the Todd Woodcroft that you knew?
Very similar to the one you did, I think. No, I've had wonderful interactions with Todd since he was hired. Not long after he was hired, I think we had our first conversation, and always has been great to me. I was up at UVM a couple of times last year. Had great conversations with him about hockey and about the direction of the program. It's obviously it's a difficult situation for everybody involved, and we can only go based on. I've actually said this in my reporting this week. It's hard to even know exactly what transpired because I understand the university has to be somewhat protective of identities and really can't go into full details. But all we really have are two competing statements. We have the statement from UVM. We have a statement from Todd Woodcroft's attorney, and we, as the public, have not seen any evidence to what actually transpired. It's just it's simply two competing statements at this point. So it is somewhat difficult to kind of wrap your head around. And I know there's a lot of people I talk to in the college hockey world, other coaches, player advisors, and things of that nature that are all, over the last couple of days, also trying to figure out exactly what happened there and what's the best path forward for from the advisor standpoint themselves and their players.
I don't want to put you, in this situation in particular because you're not up here and you're not covering it on the micro level. But just as someone who's been around college athletics, one of the questions that I've gotten is, why did this investigation take 4 months? So Jeff Schulman says first complaint comes in on March 16th. They get the final findings of it on July 16th or 17th, whatever Monday was. So a 4-month investigation. And on one hand, I sit here and say, yeah, that is really, really long. On the other hand, I say I don't want to be a hypocrite because we oftentimes will criticize people and administrations for making decisions too quickly. Does 4 months seem like too long? Does it seem fair? Where was your stance on kind of the timing of all this?
Yeah, in my experience, that's pretty standard. Last season, there was a similar investigation into Mel Pearson, the head coach at Michigan. Similar in the sense that the program was really the one being investigated, but his role in some misconduct there. And that report took a long time to get the results as well. I think that initial report or the initial investigation started in January of last year and wrapped around May. So it's about the same timeline. Now, the difference with Michigan was Michigan didn't act on the findings of the report until August. So Michigan had the findings of the report for 3 months before they went ahead and did anything about it. Obviously, this was a little bit quicker, and I think that's why Jeff Schulman had pointed out in his press conference that he received the report on Monday. They came to a decision on Tuesday. I think from the athletic department standpoint, they were quick in acting with the results that they had. The investigation is what took some time. And in my experience, having gone through this and covering a couple of other situations like this in the past, 3 to 4 months seems to be pretty standard.
Mike McMahon, College Hockey News with us here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM and WDEVradio.com. Again, I kind of hesitate to ask you this question because you're not here, but it's a curiosity that I have as well. Yeah. In the 7 years that I've been around, the athletic department has had a men's hockey hazing incident, has fired a women's basketball coach for verbal abuse, has had allegations of rape against men's basketball players, and now this. At what point, just in your experience in general, at what point does the athletic department take some responsibility and culpability for the things happening under its watch?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question for sure. And in situations like that, I tend to put incidents that involve coaches have to fall back on the athletic department in some sense because you hired the coach. The incidents that fall in players doing some misconduct, I generally would put that back on the coach because I would say, you recruited the players. Did you do your due diligence to know about the player, know the personal histories, and what a human being an individual might be? So there's kind of a layer. There's multiple layers to it.
Yep.
I think that's important. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of just the next story in what has been a somewhat history of stories over the last 5 to 10 years. It's probably been, like you said, you've been there for 7. So it doesn't look good. I mean, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It doesn't look good. But I think that's also why they pointed out, and I'm drawing a blank on her name, you probably know it, the women's basketball coach who was hired as the interim and then became the full-time coach. I think it's still there. So I think they were trying to point out the positives that have happened as well, even in the light of some of these negative situations. And we could see something similar here too, because I do think Steve Wheeler is a good coach. He comes from a good background, having recruited a large number of the members of the UVM team now that look like this is going to be a year where they take a step, a pretty big one. At least that's what I think is going to happen, and thought that before, this past week, and also has a history of helping turn around a program at AIC. So you could see a similar situation here as well. And I think ultimately that's what the UVM athletic department is hoping for, is that this turns into a positive story come spring.
Yeah, Lisa Kresge's the women's basketball coach. She's awesome. Mike, I coached college baseball for 2 years, so I think I have a pretty good handle on recruiting and the way it works. But it's interesting to kind of hear you and others talk about Steve Wheeler like this, because I was always under the impression that the head coach was deeply involved in recruiting, and I thought that Todd Woodcroft's connections and his NHL experience was what was driving a lot of the recruiting. But you and others have reminded me and told me that Steve Wheeler is actually a huge part of this, and maybe the recruiting won't take as big a dip maybe as I've been fearful of.
I don't think it will. Yeah, and that's not a slight on Todd's ability to recruit. It's the way that it works in college hockey is I think a little bit different. The assistants really take a lead role from the recruiting standpoint, and the way I've always described it to people is the head coach is more of the closer, right? The head coach is Mariano Rivera. Everything's been pitched. The assistant pitches 8 innings, and here comes Mariano in at the end to close it up and hopefully seal the deal. I think that's oftentimes the way it works in college hockey. And also the reason why I think it's specifically in hockey, although it's a little easier to do it now with the transfer portal. The reason why people have to be patient is you're recruiting guys 16 years old. Yeah. More often than not. And UVM was doing that. I mean, a lot of the guys that they were putting together, those early recruits, they were committing them 1, 2, maybe even 3 years out. So once you get to where they are now, I mean, this is Wheeler's 3rd year on the staff. This is kind of the first year where you can look around and say, okay, my stamp as a recruiter is really on this roster now, because it takes some time for those guys to actually get to school. Hockey's different. When you're bringing in freshmen at 19 or 20 years old and you're committing them at 16 or 17 years old. So that's why I look at it, and I like the UVM roster a lot. I think there's a lot of talent there. I wrote, ironically enough, I think it was earlier in the day on Tuesday, as I kind of projected things out for next year. I do a 1 through 64 this year, preseason ranking, kind of ranking every team in the country. And I didn't give away rankings, but I said, here are the 10 teams that I have pegged as being the most improved in the country. And Vermont was one of those 10. I don't remember where I had them within that 10, but they were one of that 10 because, I do like the players that he's been able to bring in. And it's not just Steve, it's the whole staff, but I know Steve has taken a real lead in recruiting. So I think this is a year where they have the potential to take some pretty big steps. And honestly, I don't think that the news of this week from an on-ice perspective is going to change that. I think it probably has a bigger effect if it happens in October, November, December, and you're in the middle of the season, and you've got a room full of players trying to deal with that transition in the middle of the season. But the fact that it's happening here in July, and Steve's going to be the coach, for the rest of the summer, and he's going to be the coach when they show up on campus in the fall, running through all their preseason stuff. I think it kind of relates to from the player standpoint, it's more of just a regular coaching change than anything else.
You said a lot of things that make me feel better about this situation. We're going to react to them when we get off the phone here, but I will get you out of here on a lighter note. You also, in addition to college hockey news, you spend a lot of time around Merrimack. That means that you catch up with my friend Bob Emery there, the former Plattsburgh State head coach at the Division III level, which is very much in our listening area. Bob is a good friend. I'm curious about how Bob Emery is doing and your interactions with him over the last couple of years since he's gotten down there.
Bob's the best. Yeah, I actually saw Bob earlier today. One of my kids was doing a camp, a hockey camp this week, and Bob was one of the coaches. So, no, he's been tremendous for Merrimack, and I think Scott Bork, the head coach there, would say that as well. To be able to have a guy in that hockey operations role with Bob's experience as a head coach, it's almost like having co-head coaches. It really is. And I know Scott leans on Bob a lot. I don't think there's any. I think it's taken a lot of things for Merrimack to climb the ladder the way that they've had, but over the last couple of years, but it kind of coincides with Bob joining the program. I think there's a reason for that. He's been awesome.
Well, Bob is great. We love him, and we'll catch up with him again soon as well. Mike McMahon, College Hockey News. Mike, man, we appreciate the time perspective. What's been a difficult week here, but I do think you provided some optimism for the future of the Catamount program, and we'll catch up. It's hard to believe kids are going to be back on campus in a month, so I'm sure we'll be catching up again soon.
Sounds good.
Absolutely. There goes Mike McMahon, College Hockey News. Appreciate his time. And I do think that you should feel better about things based on what he just said. Like, if you are a UVM hockey fan, I think you should feel better about things based on what he just had to say. 802-585-3026, AR Auto text line. He says the recruiting he thinks will not dip under Stephen Weidler. He thinks that the program was already on the way up and it therefore can keep its momentum, and the team will finally start to look better on the ice this year, which will then kind of snowball things and help the recruiting in the future. So I do feel more optimistic about things. And I was never in doubt that Stephen Weidler could coach, right? He was hired for a reason. I knew that he was on Eric Langstaff staff over at AIC before this. So, and they have had a good program together. So I clearly knew that Stephen Weidler was a good coach, but when you lose your head guy, it's always a question of how things are going to go from that point forward. So I'm glad to hear that things are better there, maybe than I had thought they were. Texter came in and said, Brady, if you read up on UVM men's basketball, John Becker gives a lot of credit to his assistants in recruiting, probably the same here in college hockey. That's fair, but I would say this. That John Becker's program is up and running and it's established. I'm not saying that it's recruiting on autopilot. I am not saying that at all. It's still very, very difficult. But the program is so good and is so well known that Becker, I think, does have an easier time just handing off the recruiting to his assistants, right? He's got the relationships already with the coaches. Hey, go check out. Go call this coach. He knows where the tournaments are. He's in that world. The program's good. It's been sold. It's been to the NCAA tournament. So I think it's a little easier to recruit for a program that's already established. When we look at Woodcroft, or the situation UVM men's hockey was in, I would have thought that Woodcroft was more protective of the recruiting on his own. Like, okay, I'm the head guy. We've been really bad. I've just gotten the job. I now need to do everything. And I would have thought that Woodcroft was more involved in recruiting. I wouldn't have thought that it's basically his assistants doing the recruiting and him closing the deal. I would have thought that it's him doing the recruiting and kind of bringing his assistants along, not so much for the ride, but I just would have thought that with the program where it was at, that Woodcroft would have had more ownership over the recruiting. And I'm not here to bash him for that and say, he wasn't doing a good enough job or he wasn't invested. But evidently, the way it works is even when it's your first head coaching job, or even when it's your first few years, or even when the program is down on its luck, it's still the assistants who are taking ownership of that. We'll step aside. We'll get the CBS News update. We'll come back. We'll get you ready for Red Sox baseball. Sox and Mets coming up 10 minutes from now here on DEV.
Alan Jones & Sons is open to serve you. If your car isn't running properly, call Alan Jones & Sons. They offer full-service auto repair and are qualified to repair all domestic and imported cars, trucks, and SUVs. And they only use parts equal to or exceeding those originally used by the manufacturers. You can trust Alan Jones & Sons, family-owned and providing high-quality guaranteed auto repairs for the greater Barrie community since 1976. Alan Jones & Sons, 150 Air Street, Barrie.
This is CBS News on the Hour, presented by Indeed.com.
I'm Christopher Cruz in Washington. The federal classified records criminal case against former President Trump is moving forward, says CBS News correspondent Scott McFarland.
His first ever federal prosecution of a former U.S. president now has a tentative trial date. Judge Eileen Cannon, a 2020 appointee of former President Trump, set the date for May 20, 2024. And there are several key hearings between now and then. One of them, a classified information procedures hearing, set for January 16th, the day after the Iowa caucuses.
Trump had asked that the trial be delayed until after the 2024 presidential election. A heat dome that's been lingering over large parts of the country is growing, says CBS News forecaster David Parkinson.
It is expanding, and so we are going to be seeing not just the South and West, but as we go into next week, we're going to be bringing in the plains and then eventually the Midwest into the insufferable heat.
The UN Security Council met in an emergency session today to discuss the Ukraine grain shipment agreement canceled by Russia. Officials say, quote, some will starve, many may die because of Russia's decision. At the UN, CBS's Pamela Falk.
UN officials said that Russia withdrawing from the grain deal, coupled with its bombardment of crucial ports, will further compound the crisis, but that the UN will continue its efforts to allow Ukrainian and Russian grain, a key food source for the world, to reach global markets.
Singer Tony Bennett died at his home in New York today, and his famous fans are mourning, says CBS's Bradley Blackburn.
How do you keep the music playing? With his smooth, warm voice, Bennett's interpretation of the standards earned him generations of fans. His most famous admirers ranged from Frank Sinatra to Lady Gaga, and both became close friends.
Bennett would have turned 97 in 2 weeks. President Biden met with the heads of 7 big tech companies at the White House today to talk about how to make sure AI doesn't get out of control.
We must be clear-eyed and vigilant about the threats emerging from emerging technologies that can pose, don't have to, but can pose to our democracy and our values.
He's the best player in the world, and I love him so much.
That young fan is looking forward to the debut tonight of soccer superstar Lionel Messi. He signed with Inter Miami, which faces Cruz Azul in a Leagues Cup match at his new home stadium. Messi just signed a 2.5-year contract with Inter Miami for between $50 and $60 million a year. On Wall Street at the close, the S&P 500 and the Dow up fractionally, NASDAQ down 0.25%. This is CBS News.
Need to hire quality candidates fast? You need Indeed, the end-to-end hiring solution. Attract, interview, and hire candidates all in one place. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
Now's the time to discover Waterbury, a place for once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Explore our restaurants, pubs, and cafes, and visit our unique shops. There's something for everyone. Visit discoverwaterbury.com for more information.
Woodstock Farmers Market, celebrating 30 years. We're a year-round mecca of fantastic food, offering fresh produce, cheeses, meats, grab-and-go sandwiches, coffee, baked goods, and amazing specialty products. Tuesday through Sunday on Route 100 in Waterbury Center and Route 4 in Woodstock. Stop on by.
Attention Vermont car enthusiasts. Discover Snowfire Auto, your ultimate destination for premium cars and exceptional service. We've got Subarus, Volkswagens, Hondas, Toyotas, Volvos, and Mercedes-Benz, just to name a few. Our friendly sales staff can guide you to the perfect match. And with our experienced service technicians, we'll keep you worry-free on the road. Visit Snowfire Auto in Waterbury today, or check us out online at snowfireauto.com and make your dream car a reality.
When you're ready to buy a home, there are lots of things to think about. At Community National Bank, we've been helping Vermonters settle into new homes since we first opened our doors in 1851. Even after you've signed on the dotted line, we'll be here for you through the life of your loan and beyond. Come in and talk to us. You'll feel the difference a community bank makes. Community National Bank.
Reminding you to attend this weekend's Lamoille County Field Days on Route 100C in Johnson.
This is WDEV, Vermont's news station, owned and operated by the Radio Vermont Group. From the top of Sugarbush at 96.1 FM, WDEV Warren and Waitsfield. In Barrie at 96.5. In Montpelier at 98.3. Along with our founding station, AM 550 WDEV Waterbury, Montpelier. Streaming at WDEVradio.com. 92 years of serving Vermont. The friendly pioneer, WDEV.
Think you know sports better than Brady does? Text in with your thoughts at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show. We are 5 minutes away from Red Sox baseball. Sox taking on the Mets at Fenway. First game of the weekend series. Sunday, they're going to culminate with Sunday Night Baseball. Our own Buster Olney, our buddy Buster Olney, will be there for ESPN. I'll give you the lineups here momentarily. Texter says, Brady, I'm loving your reporting on the UVM story. You are a star. Well, I don't know about that. You know who the real star of the day is? The real star of the day is Danny, our producer, who we've been lucky enough to have here for all of 1 week officially, and now we're going to roll through for all of eternity with, I hope, as our producer. Danny has been playing not only the part of producer, he's been playing the part of engineer today. Danny fixed the audio on the internet stream. So for 3 days, I've been wondering what exactly is going on with the internet stream. People are hearing this thing, but not that thing. My mic doesn't sound that great. Danny fixed everything today, and he's messaging me things like, oh yeah, I fixed the Roku cable. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell that means, but I'm glad you know what it is, and I'm glad it's fixed. I picture Danny like in there at like 7:30 this morning on his hands and knees checking cables and seeing if wires are frayed, but Danny has fixed the internet stream, and knock on wood, it stays that way throughout. So that was the last piece to our little Brady Farkas Show empire here that we're building, was getting the internet stream up, and Danny did a great job doing just that. As some of you have noticed, or noted rather, that I'm not doing the midday news service anymore. I'm doing the afternoon news service in this show, and that is ultimately, I think, good for everybody, right? Like, it gives me a little bit shorter day, which allows me to, I think, really kind of extra prep for this show and for the afternoon news, and I think that's important. But as a result, I've got some more free time on my hands right now in the early morning, in the early to late morning. Right? I can come in a little bit later. And I got to say, I need a little help from you people. 802-585-3026. I need to find out where I can get a late morning basketball run in, because when I was not growing up, but when I was part-time in Albany, when I first started in radio, I used to play basketball at the Y Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to noon. Okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to noon. And it was a great run, and I played it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from like 10:30 to noon, and it was awesome. Games were good, guys were cool. Today I'm thinking to myself, okay, I want to play like a 9 to noon run. So I go to a gym, and I won't tell you where it is, but I go to a gym, and I look at their thing online. They say they have open adult pickup until 11:30 in the morning. I get there at 8:15. I'm like, I'm going to be early. I'm going to get a lot of games in. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to get some exercise. No one's there. Not one person is there. And I asked the person at the front desk, I'm like, hey, what happened to adult hoops? They go, yeah, they're done. I'm like, done? It's 8:15. They're like, yeah, they started at 5. 5? Who is playing basketball at 5 a.m.? There is no shot in hell I am getting up at 5 a.m. to play men's basketball. Okay, zero shot. As much as I want to play, as much as I love hoops, I am not getting up at 5 a.m. I'm up far too late watching Red Sox, Mariners, Celtics, Bruins, my Sacramento Kings, who I've adopted because of my boy Herder. I'm up way too late to be getting up at 5 and then doing this show until 6:10 or 7 or whatever it is that particular day. So you tell me somewhere where I can get a run in between 9 and noon, because I am not doing 9 a.m. Red Sox lineups look like this. The Mets are 45 and 51. The Sox are 51 and 46. Pitchers are Kodai Senga for the Mets, 7-5 with a 3.20. Cutter Crawford goes for Boston, 4-4 with a 3.74. Brandon Nimmo leads off in center for the Mets. Francisco Lindor's at short. Jeff McNeil's in right today. Pete Alonso's at first. Daniel Vogelback's the DH. Francisco Alvarez is the catcher. Brett Beatty hits 7th. Mark Canha 8th. And Luis Guillorme bats 9th and plays 2nd. For the Sox, Jaron Duran's in left. left. Justin Turner's at second. Masataka Yoshida, the DH. Rocky Devers at third. Adam Duvall in center. Alex Verdugo in right. Tristan Casas at first. Connor Wong, the catcher. And Yu Chang is the shortstop. He rounds out the lineup and bats ninth. The word on Senga, throws decently hard, has a mid to slightly upper 90s fastball with that, you're going to hear it, the ghost fork ball. That's basically a power splitter, and it is very, very good. Yoshida knows Senga from Japan. I'll be curious how he handles them. Thanks to Danny. Thanks to Mike McMahon. Go check out the podcast channel. I'll see you on Monday.
It's time for the Mass Mutual Red Sox pregame show. Proudly brought to you by Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual. Insurance, planning, investments.